Look who's here, Darren. And Clara, you remember Darren's parents?
Oh, of course.
Resigning. You can always rely on the British press to be self-serving. It is a pity, you may well conclude, that some of them are not on Pioneer 10, the American space probe to which man has said farewell 6.22 billion miles from home. Bye-bye.
The NICAM solution to the Minister's problems. Thank you very much indeed. And it's time for a look at the business now here.
Thanks very much indeed, Justin. Well, let's have a look at the business stories this morning. The Carp Bank has just published its results for the last financial year. The profits are up 24% at £45.5 million sterling, a bit ahead of what the market expected. These results emerge as the Managing Director, Terry Thomas, has been warning the city entrepreneur, Andrew Regan, that he won't get his hands on the business. Mr. Regan made money by buying and selling the Co-op's food manufacturing arm. Now he's offering £500 million for another slice of the Co-op, and he's especially interested in the bank.
There's no threat to the bank. He cannot take the bank over. He cannot buy our equity shares on the marketplace. He could only buy the bank if the board of the parent company, CWS, were so to agree. And I think the chances of that happening now or any time in the future is remote and extreme.
Washington says that it's blocking £200 million of European meat exports to the US. It made the move after the EU imposed new rules requiring American meat and poultry exporters to meet European inspection standards. The trade battle began after the two sides failed to agree on hygiene regulations before an April the 1st deadline. Here in the UK, the Meat and Livestock Commission said last night that Danish ham exports would be hit, but it would have little impact on Britain. And shares in Newcastle United Football Club begin trading on the stock market today. 40 million shares will be issued at 135p each. The club will raise around £193 million, with some of the money being used to pay off debts. But Newcastle's decision to set a minimum investment level of £500 and to restrict the general public to just 10% of the issue has upset some supporters.
Well, it's excluded a lot of the ordinary fans because the minimum investment is £500, and that is a lot of money for any ordinary fan to fork out, especially as the season tickets are due as well in June, which, you know, builds things up. It has affected the ordinary fan because they say that they want to own part of Newcastle United because they love the club, and you know it sets a lot of fans, that people in the city who have no interest in the club and only want to make money out of this game will own the club, as to the ordinary fan who, you know, hasn't got a choice in the matter.
That's the business news for now. I'll be back to bring you up to date with markets in about half an hour. Meantime, let me hand you back to Sarah.
Thanks very much indeed, Paul. And we stay with a sporting theme because fox hunting is a sport associated with the rich. But today, a union for those employed in the industry is being launched to try and protect jobs. Our reporter, Emma Howard, is at a hunt kennel in Worcestershire. Good morning to you, Emma.
Good morning, Sarah. Yes, the Union of Country Sports Workers is being launched today because pressure from animal rights activists has made the future of gamekeepers and hunt workers uncertain. If Labour win the general election, they're offering MPs a free vote to decide whether hunting with hounds should be banned. John Moylan reports.
For the past 5 years, John Fretwell has been running one of the top beagle packs in the country. Hare coursing may not be everyone's idea of fun, but throughout the UK, it's been part of country life for decades.
These jobs are generally, they're not very well paid, but also part of the job is that you get your home with the job. And if these country sports were banned, these people would be out on the streets. Now, I mean, if people, you know, this has got to be taken on board, that people would be homeless, not only unemployed, homeless, and a lot of the skills they have are non-transferable. They're absolute specialists, and they're specialists who do it because they care about their job and they care about the countryside.
The activities of hunt saboteurs have focused attention on field sports. Those in the industry now fear tradition alone may not be enough to protect their jobs. They fear many sports could be banned completely. This has led to the creation of a new group to represent the industry's estimated 125,000 workers, like gamekeeper Alan Loughran. The Union of Country Sports Workers believes those who talk of banning hunting don't realise the impact it would have on rural communities.
People that I know within a 10-mile radius of us now, it'd probably be 50 people out of work with families looking for somewhere to live. I mean, if hunting stopped, people wouldn't keep the horses because they wouldn't need them for hunting. Then it'd fall back on people like farriers, saddle makers, and it just knocks on back down the line. You know, all these people are having a living out of the countryside.
People like Alan are the less well-known face of so-called blood sports. They've dedicated their lives to the countryside and to maintaining traditional country pursuits. But now, with the weight of public opinion swinging against hunting and shooting, they believe their livelihoods are in danger. But the union's fight may prove to be a last stand. With the appeal of hunting diminishing and opposition to it growing, arguments based on jobs may not hold sway with the general public.
Well, we're at the Worcestershire Hunt Kennels, and with me is the huntsman, Julian Barnfield. Good morning to you. Morning. And Sean Rickard from the Cranfield Institute of Management. Good morning. First of all, Julian, the union is launched today. You're thinking of joining it?
Yes.
Why?
Because what I've got is being threatened. So I've got an awful lot to lose.
What have you got? What are you scared of losing?
Well, to me, just about everything. It's my way of life, it's my living, it's my home. I wouldn't be able to provide for my family. We'd have nowhere to live. So I've got everything to lose, I feel.
Now, Sean, the union claim that there are 90,000 people in Julian's position. Do you agree with that?
No, I think that's a gross exaggeration. People like Julian are directly at risk because they look after the packs of hounds, and I suppose if this legislation was passed, those people would be directly at risk. But it's absolutely ridiculous to say that 90,000 people, that's almost 1/3 of the people that work in agriculture, are at risk from such a policy measure. I would guess that in the short run, perhaps 1,000 people, perhaps 2,000 people might lose their jobs.
But as we heard in the film, there'd be a tremendous knock-on effect. There are lots of people involved with the work that Julian does here, saddlers and farriers.
Absolutely right, but many of these jobs, of course, would continue to be in existence. Many people will continue to ride horses. Many people will continue to pursue country sports. Many people will continue to enjoy the countryside, and indeed they will probably add to it in other directions. And evidence all suggests that in the past, these scare stories usually result in the impact being a great deal smaller than the pressure groups want to claim.
Do you agree with that, Julian? Do you think that you could find an alternative way of living with this yard? I mean, this is specifically a hunt yard.
That's
the
right.
horses are for hunting and the foxhounds are for hunting.
That's right.
Couldn't you use them to go drag hunting or go on aniseed trails?
No, we couldn't, especially in Worcestershire, because the farmers wouldn't actually tolerate that, because we actually provide them with a service. There's a lot of sheep farmers in Worcestershire, so we actually provide a service for them. And also there isn't the room to go drag hunting. You need a lot of room to move, and there's 26 packs I think now of drag hounds, and they themselves have said there's no room for hardly any more.
So do you think this union will help preserve your job? You must be hoping it will.
I really hope so, yes, because I've got no other skill at all. I've been doing this job since I was 16 years old, so I don't know how to do anything else.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for talking to us this morning.
Thank you.
Now back to the studio and Sarah.
Thank you very much indeed. The time, 8 minutes to 8 o'clock. Born to be wild, though not next to a housing estate in Newquay, the cotton-top tamarind monkeys of Newquay Zoo have bred successfully 1 month after being released into the zoo's grounds. It's all part of a 6-month experiment to see if the monkeys can cope with freedom from captivity.
They should be roaming the jungles of South America, but these cotton-top tamarins seem perfectly happy living in the park at Newquay Zoo, close to a housing estate. It was a brave decision of the zoo to open the cage door and let them run free, but it's worked. Within a month they'd started to breed. These first twin babies are thriving. And contrary to initial fears, the tamarins haven't run off or terrorised the residents of the nearby houses. The zoos say the 6-month experiment has important implications for conservation and the possibility of returning tamarins to their natural habitat.
These are all learnt behaviours, jumping from tree to tree and learning about not going on the ground because of the dangers. Very important learnt behaviours to be passed through the generations, and who knows, in subsequent years we may release animals to the wild, and of course they'll be much more streetwise.
But our experience of foreign creatures living wild in Britain hasn't always been happy. The mink gets a particularly bad press. More than 100,000 now live in our rivers and estuaries. Their ancestors were escapees from the booming mink farms in the 50s. But they're eating their way through our native wildlife, the hapless water vole a particular favourite. Mink is said to be partly to blame for the disappearance of 90% of water voles from our riverbanks. The grey squirrel came to Britain in the last century, brought over from America by country gentlemen to add something exotic to their estates. Red squirrel, which tends to be more picky about where it lives and what it eats. One saga, however, is when food was short. And now it seems, after all, they're one foreign species that thrives better in its native land, Australia. Valerie Jones, BBC News.
About the election now at 6 minutes or so to 8. To look ahead, in fact, to a regular election feature, which is going to be coming up on Breakfast News.
They're all men of independence and eloquence and experience and wit and wisdom, and they'll say what they think and get beyond the normal sort of hack stuff of the campaign coverage.
Well, that's coming up next week. What about the weather today? Here's John Ketley. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Sarah. Well, it's a very foggy start across the southwest peninsula. That fog's slowly thinning away this morning. We've got some patchy rain up across the far northwest of Scotland as well, and it's really wet and windy now across Shetland. And that rain's going to become more extensive across northwestern parts of Britain as we run through this afternoon and into the evening. We'll find some sunny breaks throughout the day across the central and eastern parts of the country, but the cloud always on the doorstep, so it will tend to cloud over from time to time, with the sunniest weather probably across southern counties of England. Central London today, 17 degrees. Many other parts about 11 to 14. Bye-bye.
John, thanks. Still to come after 8 o'clock. The Tories make some grand promises on tax today. I'll be asking the Tory party chairman how they'll pay for them.
And as the Middle East crisis deepens, we hear live from Jerusalem. But first, the news, the travel and the weather in your area.
And here we are as usual. Very good morning to you. The time is 4 minutes to 8. The main stories from Look North this Wednesday. The Leeds-based coach company Wallace Arnold announces its pre-tax profits this morning amid continuing speculation over the company's future. It's thought the firm is about to be bought by a rival company.
Today's announcement of pre-tax profit comes at a controversial time for Wallace Arnold. Last month there was an angry protest by staff after speculation that Shearings, a rival coach company, was about to buy the firm in a multi-million-pound deal. Workers say the sale would be disastrous, with more than 300 people losing their jobs. Company chairman David Winterbottom has so far refused to comment on the deal, but with the firm selling 2.5 million holidays last year, today's pre-tax profits could offer further temptation for any potential buyer.
The inquest opens today into the death of teenager Matthew Parker, who died last month from new variant CJD linked with mad cow disease. The 19-year-old from Doncaster first became ill more than a year ago. A group which offers cheap transport for elderly and disabled people in Hull says the City Council's forcing them out of their home. Organisers say they're determined to carry on, even without a permanent base.
Hull Community Transport's taking delivery of 4 new minibuses to help clients thanks to National Lottery money. But the local authority's withdrawn its funding, and the group says it's now had an unofficial notice to quit its council-owned premises.
Tremendous amount of strain, but at the end of the day, CT's been around for 10 years, run on crisis management, and it simply means the job's that little bit harder.
The council says the decision to cut the grant was not taken lightly. It also says there have been concerns in the past over the internal management of Hull Community Transport.
Countryside campaigners in West Yorkshire have launched a protest in a bid to halt the development of land which they claim is home to protected wildlife. Bulldozers are preparing to move onto part of Grange Moor, which lies between Wakefield and Huddersfield, but environmentalists and people living nearby plan to block the bulldozers' route.
Rugby League, and both Leeds and Bradford were back in Super League action after their Challenge Cup clash at the weekend. The Bulls won 38-12 at Castleford, and it finished Halifax 24, Leeds Rhinos 18. And in football, Walsall and Chesterfield drew 1-1. That's it from us so far this morning. If you're just about to leave the house, just a reminder that your own BBC local radio station on the air now. Local news, weather, travel and sport. Your station is on the air now on both AM and FM. That's it. Have a good day. If you're staying with us here on BBC1, I should be back at, 25 minutes past 8, as usual. Here's the forecast for our part of the world then for today. Not quite as good as the last few days, but still staying dry, but much more cloud around. Especially this morning. Any sunny intervals will be this afternoon, but still fairly mild for the time of year in a light to moderate westerly wind. Temperatures at best this afternoon in the sunshine, 13 Celsius, that's 55 Fahrenheit, dropping sharply again overnight. That's the regional forecast this morning from Look North.
From the writer of The Sculptress comes a chilling new drama.
Fred, what's happened?
There's a body in the old ice house.
3 women with a secret.
You haven't met my friends, Mrs. Good and Miss Cattrall. They live here now.
1 missing husband.
She removed every single trace of him. The man simply vanished.
And 1 unidentified corpse.
You say he was eaten alive?
Minette Walter's tale of secrets and revenge, The Ice House, begins Saturday at 9 and concludes Sunday on BBC1.
Morning from Sarah and me. It's 8 o'clock on Wednesday the 2nd of April. The headlines this morning: the Conservatives launched their election manifesto today with a radical proposal on tax. John Sopel is at Conservative Central Office.
Yes, Justin, in a couple of hours' time, John Major will declare that his aim is to bring the basic rate of income tax down to 20 pence in the pound in the lifetime of the next Parliament.
And in other news, Israel's Prime Minister is to meet President Clinton for urgent talks on the growing tension in the Middle East. And back here, house prices keep on climbing, but the Halifax says there's no sign of an 80s-style boom.
Also in this morning's BBC Breakfast News, as another football club travels away to the stock market, should more fans be swapping their scarves for shares? And why the cotton-top tamarins are making a home from home in Newquay.
The Conservative Party will publish its manifesto this morning, the document that sets out the party's intentions if it wins a 5th term in office. And as expected, it contains at least one surprise feature designed to catch the national imagination. Lance Price is at our election desk. Lance.
Well, there's an awful lot riding on this document, Justin, obviously, and not surprisingly, the Tories have been keeping it pretty much under wraps. It was being delivered in hefty cardboard boxes to Tory Central Office yesterday. We weren't even allowed to see the cover. Apparently even that would give too much away. As for the content, the Conservatives will repeat their aim of getting the basic rate of income tax down to 20 pence in the pound, saying for the first time that they hope to do it within 5 years. There'll be a tax boost for married couples, allowing an unmarried spouse to transfer his or her personal allowance to a working partner. That should be a non-working spouse, I think. A radical reform of pensions, offering everyone the chance of their own private pension plan, and, as expected, proposals to privatise the London Underground. Plenty of other stuff too, of course, but the central message is clear. If the Tories are to claw this election back, it's the economy which they believe will help them do it.
Lance, we'll learn more from you in a moment. We can cross now to Westminster, and the Conservatives chairman, Dr. Brian Mawhinney, joins us from there. Dr. Mawhinney, good morning.
Morning, Justin.
This sounds like a huge and expensive commitment on tax. Where will the money come from?
We will publish the costings of the manifesto this morning so that people will see exactly how it will be dealt with over the lifetime of a Parliament. What you are going to see is a bold manifesto building on the economic success that we've already got, showing how we can carry that forward through the next 5 years, and at the same time widening opportunity and choice to an ever greater circle of people.
But if you are to make 2 million or so people about £20 a week better off, as seems to be the suggestion, then the money has got to come from somewhere, hasn't it? And could you confirm that it must either come from increasing taxes in other areas or from cutting public expenditure?
Well, you will see the answers to all of those specific questions when the manifesto is launched later today. But what is important to us is that people should be allowed to keep as much of their own money as possible in balance with having sufficient resources to spend more on schools and hospitals, the police and the other services that we all value. And we're going to do that prudently. We have been able to have 25 tax cuts in the last 2 budgets because we have managed public expenditure. We have managed to keep inflation low. We're going to build on that to the benefit of millions of hard-working men and women up and down the country.
And you will be telling us exactly where the funds can be found for this huge change in tax. It's not going to be something vague like future improvements in the economy.
Well, you will see the answers to those questions when the manifesto is launched later today.
Simply that you wouldn't let Labour get away with a commitment like this, would you? You'd be jumping up and down.
Well, the Labour Party already has a problem before its manifesto is published tomorrow. People know that in the first 2 years, just the first 2 years, Mr Brown already has £12,000 million of spending commitments that he can't cover. And people watching this know that that means that, as under any Labour Party, taxes would go up and mortgages would go up.
Isn't the central problem for you that whatever you put in this manifesto, people simply won't believe you because they saw what happened last time? All sorts of things have happened since the last manifesto and the last election which weren't in it.
No, I believe that people will understand that coming off the back of a world recession, some tough, politically difficult decisions had to be made. We made them, and we made them because they were right. People can now see that they were right. And as I said, in the last 2 budgets, there's been 25 tax cuts as we have resumed our prudent reduction of taxation as the economy permits. Those are Conservative instincts, and they are instincts on which we want to build in the next Parliament.
But the fact is that if circumstances appear to demand it in the future, then you can happily junk what's in the manifesto today and do other things.
People can never take account of the unforeseen. That's a truism. But our intentions are clearly set out, and I think people will be impressed by them.
The 20% basic rate of tax commitment, this is within the lifetime of a Parliament, is it? Because you've had the commitment before, but just not in 5 years.
And we have been moving to it to the extent that now 1 in 4 of taxpayers in this country only pay the 20% rate. But you will find the actual details in the manifesto launched later this morning.
But what I'm moving towards wondering is whether all of these are aspirations or commitments.
Well, forgive me, Justin, but I'm not here to actually unveil the details of the manifesto. You will get that later today. But I'm certainly happy to confirm that the Conservative Party's instincts are continue to be to allow people to retain as much as possible of what they themselves earn.
Can we have a final word about the TV debate, which looks as if it's off now, doesn't it? Mr Major says Mr Blair is chicken. If he is, then it's sort of 1-1 now, isn't it? Because last time round Mr Major was chicken.
What we've got are proposals from the broadcasters, not from me or the Conservative Party, from the broadcasters, from the BBC and from ITV. We accept those. Mr Blair won't. This is the man who said any time, any place, head to head with Major. And now he's running away. He's scared. He's chicken. People understand that.
Mr Major last time, though, said that these things were for losers. People who wanted them were for losers, and now here he is wanting it.
We have developed a strategy of taking the message to the people. The debates were an important part of that strategy. Mr Blair has got scared. He's run away. He's chicken. And we will continue to remind people of that fact between now and Election Day. Incidentally, if you can't believe what he says on debates, why should you believe what he says about anything else?
Dr Mawhinney, with that thought, we will leave it for the time being. Thank you very much for joining us. Let's go back now to our election desk and to Lance Price. Lance.
Well, we haven't seen the manifesto yet, and as you could tell from Brian Mawhinney there, he's pretty reluctant to give very much away about it. But while the Tories won't let us have a look at what they've got to say, the Labour Party, in a sense, have obliged. They've published the Conservative manifesto, or rather they've republished it. It's here. They've been handing out last time rounds the 1992 manifesto, and they're claiming that there are still 92 promises in there that were never kept. As for this year's document, Labour are saying that even though they haven't seen it, they've had a chance to start costing it, and they've come up with a figure of £13 billion. They're calling it irresponsible and fantasyland politics.
At the last election, the Tories made the same promises on tax, which they put up, on borrowing. The national debt's doubled since John Major became Prime Minister. The problem for the Tories is that nobody trusts them. Nobody believes a word they've got to say on tax or anything else.
Democrats are making health the issue of the day from their point of view. Paddy Ashdown has been campaigning and handing out cups of tea and warm words at Guy's Hospital in London, stressing his party's commitment to higher spending, funded in a variety of ways, including higher taxes on cigarettes and tobacco.
And I beg the other two parties, do what we will do. We won't be perfect, but do what we will do. Make a plain promise, attach to it the cost, say how you will pay for it, and tell people what the results will be. Now, I hope the Conservative manifesto will do that. No more betrayals of promises like they made last time. We're not going to raise your taxes and then raise them 22 times.
A couple of other developments today. The Scottish National Party launched their campaign with their first full press conference in Edinburgh, and Conservatives in Beckenham in Kent meet tonight to decide whether to formally adopt Piers Merchant as their candidate. He's the man you might just remember who's been accused of a certain liaison with a 17-year-old nightclub hostess. One surprise in the Mail this morning, the former Prime Minister Ted Heath actually mentions Margaret Thatcher by name, something that nobody can quite remember him doing since she deposed him as Tory leader, and he's almost nice about her too. As for the wider political scene, he says, after so long a period of one-party rule, one can understand why some people are attracted by the idea of time for a change. But the plain truth is that Britain cannot afford to change. Now, we're being joined from Conservative Central Office by our correspondent down there, John Sopel, who'll be following John Major's campaign. John, we've had big ideas from the Conservatives in the past. Privatisation was one, council house sales was another. This time round, is it this shift in tax allowances? It doesn't quite sound to be on the same scale, does it?
Well, the Tories are insisting that this is the most radical manifesto that's been seen in the past 20 years, which I suppose in some ways what some will interpret as cocking a snook at all that Margaret Thatcher did, that this manifesto will be more radical than anything she came up with. What they're saying is they're trying to stress that the first stage of conservatism, the first stage of the revolution took place with Margaret Thatcher, that there's now going to be another phase in the operation that will follow it, and this is what John Major is promising, and he's saying that I want to replace the false independence of being dependent on security with the real independence of earning your own income. And there are lots of sort of threads that are running through there, and the party of the haves as well as the have-nots, the have-nots as well as the haves, and also stressing some of the themes that we saw at the Tory Central Council conference in Bath. The party, he says, will be firmly planted in the centre ground of British politics, which does sort of leave you with the feeling, well, how can it be both radical and positioned in the centre ground? And no doubt Mr Major will be pressed to explain precisely what that means at his news conference later this morning.
But also, how can it be responsible and include what appear to be some pretty expensive pledges? Isn't this going to make it more difficult for the Conservatives to attack Labour for being spendthrift?
Well, I think that is a problem for them, and it's interesting that how the sort of geometry has shifted on this, because it seems that Labour will now be the party saying, look, the Tory, this manifesto isn't costed properly. We're promised, though, that after John Major unveils the manifesto this morning, that the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, William Waldegrave, the man who controls the purse strings, will come to Central Office and explain just how they're going to do this. Because if you start totting up what's involved in, say, getting the basic rate of income tax down to 20 pence, well, that will cost about £6 billion. This transfer of allowances, that could cost another £2 billion. Well, about precisely how they're going to do this, whether it's going to be achieved through raising other taxes or reducing...
And that's it from the election desk so far this morning.
Thanks, Lance. Let's look at other news now. The second biggest teachers' union, the NASUWT, has threatened to take industrial action if unnecessary bureaucracy and red tape isn't significantly reduced. At its conference in Bournemouth, the union is also warning against the idea of banning strikes in schools.
Workload? Don't talk to me about workload.
A demonstration of the paperwork required before a school inspection brought laughter, but the NASUWT says it's a serious threat to teaching, taking 80 weeks of a school's working time, the equivalent to 2 staff members for a year. General Secretary Nigel de Gruchy is publicising quotes from inspectors themselves, calling the preparatory work demanded by education authorities a waste of time and money. He says the next government must listen.
NASUWT certainly wants to discuss things with the new government, and we can reduce workload by stripping away all the useless bureaucracy at nil cost to the taxpayer. Now, if the Labour government or a new government doesn't agree to that, then they really would face a boycott by NASUWT, and that is not an idle threat.
Is it an example where the child shows that they're good at obtaining evidence?
Teachers who in the past refused to administer over-complex assessment tests now object to the detailed analysis required after each topic.
We want things to be slimmed down. We've had our 93 boycott and things were slimmed down after that. And that's our aim, by highlighting things that people are doing.